What happens when a Hollywood star, known for his charisma and commanding presence, faces a host who isn't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions? This moment on Lorraine Kelly's show went down in television history, leaving viewers stunned and sparking heated debates on social media. It started as a routine interview to promote Vin Diesel's new film, but nobody was prepared for what happened next. The ITV studio in London buzzed with energy. The live audience, mostly women, hummed with anticipation as Lorraine Kelly, smiling and confident, announced her guest. The lights shone brightly, cameras whirred, and the backstage green room was a flurry of activity. Vin Diesel, the star of the Fast and Furious franchise and one of Hollywood's most iconic action heroes, stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. His broad smile and signature swagger elicited cheers, but behind the scenes, producers already sensed this episode might take an unpredictable turn. Vin Diesel entered the studio in a black leather jacket, exuding a confidence that bordered on effortless ease. Lorraine, dressed in an elegant fuchsia dress, greeted him with a warm smile, her Scottish accent adding a touch of friendliness. The audience clapped as Vin settled onto the bright yellow couch, his massive frame contrasting with the soft cushions. On the table between them sat a glass of water and a promotional poster for the new Fast X film, promising another dose of adrenaline-fueled action. "Well, Vin, welcome to the show," Lorraine began, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "You're looking as cool as ever, and I hear this new Fast film is going to blow everyone away. Tell us, what's in store?" Vin grinned, his deep voice filling the studio. "Thanks, Lorraine. It's a big project, you know. We poured our hearts into this one. It's about family, connection, and overcoming challenges together. And, of course, a lot of speed and action." The audience chuckled as he threw in a quip about learning new stunts for the shoot. The atmosphere was light, the cameras gliding smoothly to capture his charismatic smile. Backstage, Lorraine's assistant and other crew members exchanged satisfied glances, pleased with the smooth start. But in Lorraine's eyes, a sly glint went unnoticed by all but the most attentive viewers. The interview began with typical questions about filming, the cast, and the challenges of working on a blockbuster franchise. Vin answered with enthusiasm, sharing stories about his camaraderie with co-stars and the importance of family values in the films. But Lorraine, known for her directness, suddenly shifted her tone. "You know, Vin, you always talk about family, and it sounds great in your movies," she said, her voice sharpening slightly. "But I've heard some rumors that your behavior on set hasn't always been so family-oriented. There's talk about conflicts with other actors, particularly Dwayne Johnson. What do you say to that?" The studio fell silent. The audience, which had been laughing moments before, froze, sensing the shift in mood. The camera zoomed in on Vin's face, and though his smile remained, his eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his massive hands resting on his knees. "Lorraine, I think rumors are just rumors," he replied calmly, though a hint of tension crept into his voice. "We're all professionals, and things happen on set. But at the end of the day, we respect each other and do what's best for the film." Lorraine didn't back down. Her eyebrows arched slightly, and her smile turned almost sarcastic. "Sure, but you're not denying there was some friction, right? I mean, Vin, you're the star, you set the tone. People say you can be, how should I put it, a bit demanding. Is that true?" The audience gasped, a few exchanging stunned glances. Backstage, a producer, a young man in headphones, nervously clutched his tablet. Lorraine's assistant, seated nearby, whispered something to a colleague, but no one intervened. Vin Diesel took a deep breath, his shoulders tensing, yet he maintained his composure. "Lorraine, I think it's important to focus on the work, not gossip," he said, his voice deeper, almost menacing, but still controlled. "I show up to make something great for the fans. We're all there to create something special. I don't think we should waste time on things that didn't happen." But Lorraine pressed on. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming as if she'd sensed a weak spot. "All right, but let's be honest. You present yourself as this big family man, but some say it's just an image for the cameras. How do you respond to claims that you're not who you seem to be?" The silence in the studio was palpable. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. A man beside her pulled out his phone, clearly ready to record what happened next. The cameras hummed, operators scrambling to adjust angles to capture Vin's reaction. His jaw clenched, and his fingers locked tightly together as he leaned back on the couch. "Lorraine, I don't know where you're getting these accusations," he said, his voice steady but laced with steel. "My family is my life. My kids, my loved ones, that's what I work for. And I don't let anyone cast a shadow on that." The audience erupted in applause, but Lorraine raised a hand, as if calling for silence. Her smile widened, but it lacked warmth. "I'm just asking the questions people want answers to, Vin. You know how this works. People want to know who you really are, not just the image you sell in your films." Those words hit like a knife. Vin Diesel slowly stood, his towering figure casting a shadow over the brightly lit stage. The cameras pulled back hurriedly, trying to keep him in frame. The audience froze, sensing the climax approaching. The producer backstage gestured frantically for Lorraine to stop, but she waved him off. "Lorraine, I came here to talk about my film, about the work we do for the fans," Vin said, his voice louder but still controlled. "But if you want to play these games, throw accusations at me about things you don't understand, then I'm not sure I belong here." The studio buzzed with whispers and gasps. Lorraine, seemingly caught off guard, quickly recovered. "Oh, come on, Vin, don't be so sensitive. We're just talking," she said, her tone playful but dripping with sarcasm. Vin Diesel looked at her, his eyes burning with quiet anger. He slowly removed the microphone from his jacket, holding it in his hand as if weighing his words. Then he turned to the audience, his voice deeper and more resonant. "You know, I'm not perfect. None of us are. But I know who I am, and I know what I stand for. My family, my work, my fans, that's what keeps me going. And if you think you can throw accusations at me for ratings, Lorraine, you're wrong." The audience exploded in applause, some standing and shouting words of support. Lorraine opened her mouth to respond, but Vin raised a hand, silencing her. "I'm done here," he said, tossing the microphone onto the couch. He turned and walked off the stage, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The cameras scrambled to follow him, while the producers backstage panicked, unsure of what to do next. The studio was stunned. Lorraine sat, her face a mix of shock and discomfort. She tried to smile, addressing the audience. "Well, that was unexpected, wasn't it?" But her joke fell flat. The audience was divided. Some whispered that Vin was right, while others felt Lorraine was just doing her job. Phones in the audience were already recording the final moments, and it was clear this clip would go viral. Backstage, producers debated whether to cut the segment, but it was too late. The live broadcast had already done its work. On social media, hashtags like #VinDieselWalkout and #LorraineKelly began trending, and clips of his speech racked up thousands of views within minutes. This moment reshaped perceptions of both Vin Diesel and Lorraine Kelly. For some, Vin became a symbol of dignity, standing up for his principles in the face of provocation. For others, he seemed overly sensitive, dodging tough questions. Lorraine faced criticism for crossing a line, though her supporters argued she was simply doing her job as a journalist. What do you think of this conflict? Did Vin Diesel do the right thing by walking off? Did Lorraine have the right to ask those questions? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated on stories like this. When the show returned from the commercial break, the ITV studio still buzzed with tension. Lorraine Kelly, forcing a smile, clutched her notes nervously. The live audience, having just witnessed Vin Diesel's dramatic exit, whispered among themselves, and the cameras hummed, capturing her every move. Backstage, producers scrambled, exchanging panicked glances, as the live broadcast left no room for pause. But no one expected the story wasn't over yet. Lorraine took a deep breath, her voice slightly shaky but striving for professional confidence. "Well, that was unexpected, wasn't it?" she said, addressing the audience with a faint smile. "But we're moving on with the show because we've got plenty more in store." Her words were met with hesitant applause, but the tension in the studio was palpable. A woman in the front row still held her phone, recording, while a man beside her whispered to his neighbor, clearly discussing what had just happened. Backstage, a producer in headphones spoke frantically into his radio. "Is he still here? Has anyone seen him?" he asked, but there was no response. Lorraine's assistant, a young woman with a nervous expression, clutched a tablet, scrolling through messages already flooding in from viewers on social media. The hashtag Vin Diesel Walkout was skyrocketing, and clips of Vin's speech were gaining tens of thousands of views. Lorraine moved to the next segment, attempting to lighten the mood with a discussion about a new fashion trend, but her words felt forced. The audience listened half-heartedly, still buzzing about the earlier conflict. Suddenly, the backstage door opened with a quiet creak, and the studio fell silent again. Heavy footsteps echoed across the stage, and Vin Diesel returned. The audience gasped, and Lorraine froze, her eyes widening in surprise. Vin, still in his black leather jacket, looked calm, but his gaze was as hard as steel. He stopped center stage, not sitting on the couch, and raised a hand, signaling he wanted to speak. The cameras hurriedly zoomed in, operators struggling to keep up. The producer backstage clenched his fists, unsure if this was the show's salvation or an even bigger disaster. "I left because I don't like being forced to play games that tear people down," Vin began, his voice low and resonant. "But I came back because I don't want people thinking I'm running from tough conversations. Lorraine, you said you're asking the questions people want answers to. Fine. Let's talk. But this time, for real." The audience erupted in applause, some standing and shouting words of support. Lorraine, clearly thrown off, tried to regain her composure. "Vin, I'm glad you're back," she said, her voice cautious. "I didn't mean to offend you. I was just doing my job, you know?" Vin nodded, but his eyes remained sharp. "I get that you're doing your job. But when you throw accusations without knowing the truth, you're not just doing a show, you're hurting people. Me, my family, my team. And I'm not going to let that slide." Lorraine, sensing the pressure, tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. "All right, Vin, let's talk about your family. You always say they're your priority. How do you balance your career and personal life?" But Vin didn't let her pivot. "No, Lorraine, let's not dodge what happened," he said, his voice rising. "You accused me of not being who I seem. You hinted I'm a hypocrite. So tell me straight, what did you mean? What rumors were you talking about?" The studio fell silent again. The camera zoomed in on Lorraine's face, where a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. She gripped her notes, her fingers trembling slightly. "Vin, I wasn't accusing you of anything specific. I just heard talk about conflicts on set. People say you can be tough to work with. I just wanted to hear your side." Vin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "My side is simple. I give everything to my work. I'm demanding because I want it to be perfect for the fans. But I respect my team. And if someone says otherwise, they can say it to my face, not hide behind rumors." The audience burst into applause again, and this time, even Lorraine couldn't quiet them. She tried to interject. "Vin, I didn't mean for it to come off as an attack. I was just—" "No, Lorraine," he interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "You knew what you were doing. You wanted drama because drama sells. But I'm not here to feed your ratings. I'm here to tell the truth." Then turned to the audience, his massive frame dominating the stage. The cameras zoomed in on his face, a mix of anger, dignity, and vulnerability. "I grew up in a world where I had to fight for everything I have," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I know what respect is because I earned it. And I know what family is because it holds me together every day. You can throw rumors, accusations, whatever you want at me. But you won't make me ashamed of who I am." The studio erupted in cheers. People stood, clapping, some wiping tears. The woman in the front row, who had been recording earlier, now simply stared, her phone forgotten in her hands. Even the operators, usually stoic, exchanged stunned glances. Lorraine sat silently, her face pale, her smile gone. then turned back to her, his voice quieter but no less powerful. Lorraine, I respect your work. But respect is a two-way street. If you want to talk about the truth, let's talk. But if you want to play games, I'm not playing. He turned slowly and walked off the stage a second time, unhurried, his steps deliberate. The backstage door closed quietly, leaving the studio in deafening silence. Lorraine remained on stage, her hands trembling as she tried to return to her script. Well, that was emotional, she said, her voice unsteady. Let's move on to the next segment. But her words were drowned out by the audience's whispers, still processing what had happened. The cameras panned to capture the crowd's reactions as they shared their thoughts. On social media, Vin's return was already going viral. Clips of his speech spread like wildfire, with hashtags like #VinDieselSpeaks and #LorraineKellyDrama racking up millions of views. Fans praised him for his dignity and strength, while others criticized Lorraine for crossing a line. Some defended her, arguing she was just doing her job as a host. This conflict became one of the most talked about moments in television history. For many, Vin Diesel emerged as a symbol of standing up for one's principles, refusing to be humiliated for entertainment. Lorraine Kelly faced backlash for her provocation, though her supporters argued she was trying to make the show engaging. What do you think of this moment? Did Vin Diesel do the right thing by returning to stand his ground? Did Lorraine have the right to ask those questions, or did she cross a line? Can television remain honest when it chases ratings? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to catch more stories that make us reflect on respect, dignity, and truth.